All right, let's talk SEC because it's a mess at the top, and we have a potential for mass chaos atop the SEC at the end of the season. So let's go through this list real quick. Currently, sitting atop the SEC with one loss apiece, Tennessee, Texas A&M, and UT. Okay, those three teams have one loss. Texas is 4-1, A&M 5-1, Tennessee 5-1. Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, Missouri, and LSU all sit with 2 losses. Everybody below that has 3 or more losses. Okay, so we're going to look from LSU up. All right. Now, Tennessee has to play at Georgia this week. Okay, so for sake of argument, let's say Tennessee loses to Georgia in Athens. Very realistic, very likely to happen. Georgia beats Tennessee. Georgia will still have 2 losses in the SEC. That would put Tennessee to 2 losses in the SEC. Okay? Now here's the key part to where this could get really, really wild. All right? A&M's got to lose to Auburn. Okay? If A&M loses to Auburn, that gives A&M 2 losses. And what that does is, assuming Texas wins their next 2 games, in which they're going to be a 14-plus point favorite on the road at Arkansas this week and probably a 17-plus point favorite at home against Kentucky the following week. Texas wins those 2 games, and A&M loses to Auburn. Texas goes into that game at A&M the final week of the regular season with 1 SEC loss. A&M will have 2. Why is that important? Because everybody below them has 2, and none of them play each other. Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, Missouri, LSU, none of them play each other. Okay? Nobody in the top besides Tennessee and Georgia, and then Texas and Texas A&M have each other left on the schedule. So Tennessee loses to Georgia, they got 2 losses, right? A&M loses to Auburn, they got 2 losses. Now, Texas and Texas A&M play in College Station, under the lights at Kyle Field, the last night of the regular season. Okay? I'm a Texas fan. Texas will be favored by 7 points in that game. Probably, maybe 7.5. That's not going to be a cakewalk by any means. There's a legit possibility A&M wins that game outright. But if A&M loses at Auburn, and then A&M beats Texas, and Texas hasn't lost another game in the SEC to Arkansas or Kentucky, you now have Tennessee with 2 losses. You have A&M with 2 losses. You have Texas with 2 losses. You have Georgia with 2 losses. You have Ole Miss with 2 losses. You have Alabama with 2 losses. You have LSU with 2 losses. The only team that I think would spoil the possibility of the 8-team tie for the top of the SEC would be Missouri. Missouri is a double-digit underdog this week at South Carolina. Okay? Let's say, for sake of argument, Missouri does win and upset South Carolina. Then they're at Mississippi State and versus Arkansas. They're probably going to be favored in both those games. Arkansas, you could argue, will be a pick 'em depending on who starts at quarterback. Even if Missouri were to lose, right, that game to South Carolina, there's still potential for a 7-way tie because you look at some of these schedules for the rest of these teams, right? Like LSU, who has 2 losses. Their final 3 games, at Florida versus Vanderbilt versus Oklahoma. All 3 are winnable, right? Alabama has Mercer at home, not an SEC game, obviously, at Oklahoma, and then the Iron Bowl at home against Auburn. Ole Miss, who just took care of Georgia, at Florida versus Mississippi State after a bye this week. Georgia, like we said, they have to beat Tennessee, or their whole season's pretty much over. Then they play UMass at home and Georgia Tech. That's Georgia's last SEC game. They've already taken care of every SEC game except for Tennessee. So Georgia wins, they finish 6-2. Right? And then we talked about Texas, Texas A&M, and Tennessee. Tennessee's other 2 games after Georgia are UTEP and Vanderbilt. Okay? Now, look, Vanderbilt's a good football team. Vanderbilt's, could very easily spoil multiple teams getting into this tiebreaker, right? Vanderbilt plays at LSU and versus Tennessee. I guarantee you those are not going to be blowouts. All right, I know South Carolina just beat them. Diego Pavia's been a little bit banged up, but Vanderbilt's a very, very solid football team. And that last game at home against Tennessee with a chance to possibly knock Tennessee out of the playoff is going to be really, really fun matchup with Vanderbilt. But I just wanted to talk about the crazy scenario in which there is a legit possibility that we get a 6, 7, or even possibly 8-way tie atop the SEC